So we have seen amazing innovations today. We have basically seen how AI can really transform everything from education to innovation to productivity to collaboration. We also saw how we can use AI to map the space of ideas, to map this cartography of ideas. So I am joined here today to basically discuss how this is going to change the world of business, how this is going to change the world of innovation, the world of collaboration, and the world of productivity. So with us, we have Andrew Lowe and Jackie Lane from MIT Sloan Business School and the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab for Andrew, and from the Harvard Business School, focusing on AI for Jackie Lane. So Jackie, we have built a lot of technologies in my own lab for being able to navigate the space of ideas, to being able to sort of take thousands of documents, thousands of startup pitches, as we heard today, and map them in a cartography, in a physical topological graph. How do you blend this, and how do we help navigate this map with the use of AI for innovation, AI for evaluating, not just mapping the ideas, but actually evaluating their novelty?
Oh, I think this cartography is amazing. Our research group looks at how we come up with ideas and how we evaluate them and how AI is changing and improving that process. And so today, ideas are everywhere. They were before, but now they're everywhere. It's so cheap and it's so fast to use AI to come up with business ideas. Let me tell you, we did a study on this, and it was $27.03. $27.03 to come up with ideas. And so as a result of that, we need a cartography. We need a landscape to take us out of this sequential view of one at a time of how we evaluate and bring it into this bird's eye view, and so that we can see how ideas are correlated, how they're different, where their peaks are, and which ones are similar to each other. And so, today we had a talk with Andrew, and he talked about, taking a cartography and a landscape view. How do you think of this landscape view and bringing it into drug discovery?
That's a really good point, because typically the way biotech companies are developed is sequentially, one at a time. The way they're evaluated is one at a time. But the issue is that disease is not one at a time. And so very often you can actually get more drugs developed cheaper, faster, better if you focus on a combination of them all at the same time. So this is portfolio theory. It's one of these ironies that sometimes if you actually invest more money into a project, it actually gets less risky. And so it's not always the case that by looking at one at a time, you can actually reduce your risk. And this kind of portfolio theory is underscored by the kind of work that Manolis has done in using genomics to look at all disease in a systematic way, so that you're really focusing not on one or two, but on the entire system of diseases and tackling them in a more generic fashion. So maybe you should talk a bit about that.
So the key idea is that the same way that we can map the landscape of ideas, we can basically see how our ideas about, climate change related to innovation in AI or in changing business mentality or changing bias, for example. We can also map the space of biology. We can now take proteins and ask, where are they in the embedding space of functional diversity? So we can basically construct graph neural networks with knowledge graphs that connect every protein to the functions that it is associated with, that connect every drug to the functions that it impacts, or the drugs that, or the indications that it is associated with, or the diseases for which it is prescribed, or the proteins that we know it interacts with, or the transcriptional changes that we know it impacts, it leads to. So now we can basically create that landscape, not just for biological descriptions, but also for the biological knowledge, for the structure of the chemicals, for the structure of the proteins, for the function of the proteins, and so on and so forth. The reason why that's exciting is as you're investing, as you're using Andrew's approach to start de-risking your portfolio in order to make it much more appealing to a large pool of investors that will each get a 20% return in some cases, as we saw, what you can actually do is see where each drug falls on the landscape of biology, where each protein target falls on the landscape of Alzheimer's disease. And you can use that to now start de-risking this, to start investing from a landscape perspective, not just focusing very narrowly in this space of ideas. And Jackie, I think that's something that you've told me before about, that when you go through the traditional process of filtration, you end up sometimes with ideas that are very similar to each other and therefore not de-risked. So how can you use AI to bring multiple perspectives and diverse perspectives in the evaluation criterion? We've heard a lot about human bias, but another way to call it is human perspectives. And you don't want to remove the bias of each person. Perhaps you want to combine people together. So how can we use AI tools for doing that?
Yeah, so oftentimes when we're thinking about the way that we come up with ideas in this sequential stage gate kind of process, what ends up happening is we may end up with ideas that are very, very correlated with each other, as Manolis was saying. And so one way that we can think about, if we're using a landscape perspective, is having multi-agents there, right? So you have an agent who represents each perspective in each of those peaks or those spaces that you're thinking about, and they can collaborate with each other. They can be adversarial with each other, and think about the ways that you can combine these different ideas together. And you can think about the small jumps that you can take or the bigger conceptual leaps. And by having these different agents within the landscape all talk and interact with each other, we can find new recombinations and new combinations that we may not have been able to do before these tools existed. And so I think this brings in a question, because so far we've been talking about really just the agents working within the landscape. And the question that I have for you, Manolis, is how do we bring the human back in?
This is a fantastic question. So the way that I like to think about it is that we have created a landscape where humans are not able to enter. If you basically take all of the data from every single corporation, it is currently only usable by computers. We've basically thought about data as the new oil. So every company went out and gathered a bunch of oil, but this oil is crude. We don't have refineries. We don't have a way to actually navigate it, to use it successfully. So what we need is a way to enable humans to enter the space of data. I always tell my students the rule number one of genomics is look at the darn data. And if we don't look at the data, humans are basically left out of the game. AI is kind of playing with itself, and it's like, well, we don't have time for you, human, because you can't play in this game. So what we can do is actually create these interactive tools where we can use human intuition. We can use the fact that humans are thinking hierarchically. They're thinking in terms of abstractions. They're thinking in terms of geography, of topology. And we can enable tools that bring the human back in the picture, that basically allow the human to be in charge, allow the human as the agent that is driving these AI models. But again, understanding this landscape of ideas is only part of the equation. As you have shown time and time again, Andrew, in your own work, once you know what the drug is targeting, once you know that sort of small spot in this cartography, there's so much more that you need to know. So how can we blend both of this cartography as well as this evaluation of ideas that Jackie is building with additional information beyond just the ideas? Because a lot of us technologists and engineers are sort of very narrowly focused on what am I building? Whereas when you have the larger, broader finance and business perspective, then you can think about the entire ecosystem. So are there AI tools that allow us to actually also tackle that aspect beyond just the ideas themselves?
Oh, without a doubt. I think a number of researchers are using machine learning techniques, large language models, to actually focus on the broader ecosystem of not only drug development, but also drug delivery. So one good example is that, we spend a lot of time thinking about predicting clinical trial outcomes or designing molecules using AI to be able to develop drugs. But what if you develop a drug and it's so expensive that nobody wants to use it because they can't afford it? That's not such a good outcome. You spend a lot of money developing a drug that it really goes to waste. So part of that ecosystem, part of this landscape that you're building with your cartography is not just about drug delivery, but it's about drug development and delivery together at the same time. And I think that by using the kind of tools that Jackie's talking about, we can actually see all of this at the same time, so that when you're developing the drug, you're also thinking about how much it's going to pay in order to be able to deliver it in a way that people are going to be using it. So I'm really excited about the technologies you're developing. It's the difference between a microscope and a wide-angle lens. And so I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, often we think about things in a microscope, and so the way that we've often thought about, at least let's more broadly, even outside of drug development, but let's talk about startup ideas, is we're thinking about the economic or the financial returns. But there's another aspect today, and that's really this microscope perspective, because we really are trying to find those ideas that can drive impact, but that's often economic or financial impact. The other way that we can think about it, if we take it outside of this into a bird's eye view or a terrain approach, is the multiple objectives that we care about. And so as a result, we can think not only about the economic impact, but also the social impact together. And that's where you can develop drugs that will also have an impact on many lives, because they'll be affordable and people can definitely benefit from it.
So in closing, I want to really thank you all for being here, for embracing the power of AI to change the world. I want to challenge every single one of you to think, what space would you map? As a cartographer, what would be the landscape that you want to tackle in order to steer your company, your team, your innovation, your engineering, and so on and so forth, and to start thinking about both how to use AI as a partner to provide a multifaceted, multi-biased, if you wish, approach to understand every one of the ideas and to evaluate them, to start thinking about the broader economic implications, and to be able to zoom both in and out from the microscope to the landscape and back. Thank you.